The young man had recently become a disciple of a renowned spiritual master. His heart brimmed with questions, questions not born of curiosity alone, but from a deep unease within. One day, unable to hold back any longer, he approached the master. "Master," he began, "I've seen people start relationships full of love and care. But as time passes, they fight, they argue. Harsh words are exchanged, bonds are broken, and that love turns into hatred. Why does this happen?" The master listened silently. Then he stood and said, "Come with me." They journeyed to a nearby village. At one house, the master knocked on the door. A middle-aged man answered, eyes lighting up with respect. "Master, what brings you here? How may I serve you?" Instead of pleasantries, the master asked directly, "Is your conflict with your wife resolved? Are you at peace now?" The man's smile faded. "Master, I made a mistake marrying her. She's not a good woman. She never listens, never respects me or my family. She's always angry, always bitter. I regret everything. She left me recently, and I hope she never returns." The master turned to his disciple. "Did you hear that?" he said softly. "This is human nature. Every person has both good and bad qualities, but the mind clings only to the faults. And once the heart is filled with negativity, we begin to see everything through that lens. Eventually, we expect goodness to grow out of bitterness. But how can it?" The man interrupted. "But master, if a person is truly bad, how can we pretend otherwise? My wife never gave me a reason to be happy. How could I see any good in her?" The master asked calmly. "Did you ever give her a reason to be happy? Did you try to do something kind for her?" The man frowned. "She never gave me a chance, master. Never." "All right," the master said. "Forget the arguments. Forget the pain. Just tell me, can you remember one good thing about her?" The man fell silent, eyes narrowing as he searched his memory. "Yes," he said after a pause. "Once, my mother fell seriously ill. My wife stayed by her side, day and night. She didn't care about food or sleep. She took care of her like her own." The master nodded. "Anything else?" He hesitated, then continued. "She always woke up early. She took care of my meals, of my parents. And, when I was sick once, she stayed up all night to give me medicine. Even when she was unwell herself, she never told me. She worked hard, only to see me smile." As he spoke, his voice cracked. His eyes welled with tears. "What happened to me?" he whispered. "She had faults, yes. But she wasn't a bad person. I just refused to see anything good in her." The master laid a hand on his shoulder. "When you fixate on someone's flaws, you amplify them. And the more you look for darkness, the more it consumes you. But when you choose to see the light, even a flicker of it, it grows. That's how healing begins." The man bowed deeply, his face wet with regret. "Thank you, master." He turned and walked away to bring his wife back home. The disciple stood silently, humbled by what he had witnessed. The master turned and asked, "Do you understand now why love turns to hate and relationships fall apart?" The disciple nodded. "Because we let hate occupy the space where love should be." "Exactly," the master said. "The heart cannot carry both. What you choose to keep inside becomes your truth." The disciple walked beside the master, his mind still reflecting on the earlier encounter. A quiet understanding had begun to form in his heart, but he knew there was more to learn. "Master," he asked softly, "may I ask you another question?" "Of course," the master said. "That's how wisdom begins, by asking, what is the hardest thing to do in this world?" The master paused, then smiled faintly. "To live in solitude." The disciple raised his brows. "Solitude? But that sounds easy. Anyone can live alone, right?" The master chuckled. "Is that so? Then let's try. Will you agree to stay in solitude for 30 days? The disciple hesitated for a moment, but nodded. "Yes, I will." "Good," said the master. "You will stay in a cave, not far from here. No contact with the outside world. No talking, no distractions, no tasks. Just stillness and silence. If you feel you cannot do it, the door is always open. You may leave at any time." They walked to the cave together. The master had already arranged food and water to last a month. He stood at the entrance, and said nothing more. The disciple stepped inside. At first, everything felt fine. On the first day, he found peace in the silence. There was no one to disturb him, no duties, no expectations, just time. But by the second day, a strange unease began to rise. His mind raced. Thoughts, memories, and emotions swirled like a storm. He paced back and forth. His body was still, but his mind was anything but. By the third day, the stillness felt suffocating. He couldn't focus. The silence felt like noise. Restless and frustrated, he walked out of the cave and returned to the master. The master, already waiting, greeted him with a knowing look. "I was expecting you." "I don't understand," the disciple said. "I thought solitude would bring peace, but it only brought chaos. I felt like something was pulling me outside, like I was being chased by my own mind." The master nodded. "That something was your mind. It cannot stand stillness. It craves noise, people, problems, stories, anything but silence. When you are alone, it starts to lose its grip. And like a wild beast, it panics." "I couldn't control it," the disciple admitted. "It was like being trapped with 100 voices, all shouting at once." "That is the illusion of solitude," the master replied. "You were not truly alone. You carried your inner crowd with you, memories, regrets, fears, desires. They became your company. And that is what makes solitude so difficult. Not the silence around you, but the noise inside you." The disciple sat down, disheartened. "So solitude isn't about being physically alone?" The master shook his head. "True solitude begins inside. If the mind still wanders, it will take you with it, no matter where you are. You could be in a cave or in a crowd. It makes no difference." The disciple was silent for a moment. Then he asked, "Is there any way to overcome it? To truly be still?" The master stood and motioned for the disciple to follow him. They walked to the edge of a wide river. The water moved swiftly, roaring against the rocks. "Can you build a dam on this river in one day?" the master asked. "Of course not," said the disciple. "That would take time, many days, maybe months. Planning, effort, patience." The master smiled. "Exactly. The mind is like this river, constantly flowing, pulling you with it. You cannot stop it in a day, but you can begin, slowly, brick by brick." The disciple looked into the rushing current. "So stillness is not something we force, but something we build." "Yes," the master said. "You start by noticing, then by resisting, then by redirecting. Over time, the current weakens and the waters calm. And one day, without even trying, you find that silence has become your friend." The disciple closed his eyes, breathing in deeply. The noise inside hadn't vanished, but something had changed. A seed had been planted, and this time, he would not run. The disciple returned to the ashram with a new sense of purpose burning quietly inside him. He had failed his first attempt at solitude, but he now understood why. It wasn't the cave that defeated him. It was his own undisciplined mind. He bowed before the master and said, "I want to try again, not to prove anything, but to begin the work of building the dam." The master smiled, but said nothing. He only nodded, approval given, silently. From that day, the disciple began his training in earnest. He didn't rush back to the cave. This time, he knew better. Solitude could not be forced. It had to be prepared for, like a mountain to climb, not a door to walk through. He began by making small vows to himself. "I will rise with the sun every day. I will sit in silence for 1 hour, no matter how loud my mind becomes. I will eat only what I need. I will not react to anger." Some of these vows he kept. Some he broke. The ones he broke, he made again. And each time he failed, he noticed how his mind worked, how it tempted, how it lied, how it resisted change. He started journaling his failures and insights. He learned not to scold himself, but to observe. "I am not here to conquer my mind with violence," he wrote once, "but to understand it so deeply, it has nowhere to hide." Weeks passed. The small vows grew into larger disciplines. He started staying up late, not out of anxiety, but out of peace. He found joy in repetition, in the quiet simplicity of routine. The villagers noticed the change. The once restless youth was now the calm presence many came to for advice. Even when they gossiped about him or tested his patience, he did not react. His silence was not emptiness, it was strength. Then one day, months after his first attempt, he came to the master again. "I'm ready," he said. "This time, not because I want to succeed, but because I need to try again, with awareness, not ego." The master led him to the same cave as before. Nothing had changed. The rocks, the wind, the silence, it all waited, unmoved. But the disciple standing at the threshold was no longer the same boy. He entered the cave. The first few days passed quietly. There was discomfort, yes, but not resistance. He sat. He breathed. He watched. Thoughts came like waves, but he didn't chase or fight them. He let them rise and fall. By the seventh day, time began to feel different. Mornings and nights no longer felt separate. He no longer counted hours. There was no loneliness, just awareness. One night, a memory rose sharply. His childhood, a moment of rejection. He felt tears welling up, but he didn't push it away. He let it rise, wash over him, and pass. Each day, a new layer peeled away. Fear, pride, shame, longing, they all emerged. And for the first time, he welcomed them, not as enemies, but as guests who had stayed too long without being seen. By the 20th day, there were moments, brief, fleeting, when his mind fell utterly silent. No images, no thoughts, no voice. Just being, just breath. It was in one of these moments that he realized he was not his thoughts. He had always believed he was the storm inside. But now, he could see it from a distance, like clouds from a mountain peak. And that changed everything. On the 30th day, the master came to check on him. The cave was quiet. He stepped inside. There, sitting cross-legged in the far corner, was the disciple, still, calm, unmoving. His eyes were closed, his face serene. The master waited in silence. After a moment, the disciple opened his eyes. When he saw his master, he bowed deeply, and then said, "You were right. Solitude is not the hardest thing. It is the simplest, but only once we return to what is already ours." The master smiled. "You have not escaped the world," he said. "You have entered it fully." And they walked out of the cave together. As the disciple and master walked away from the cave, silence lingered between them. Not the uncomfortable silence of strangers, but the quiet understanding between souls who had walked through fire together. They reached the riverbank where months ago the master had spoken of building a dam. The river still roared with the same wild rhythm. But now, the disciple stood beside it as a different man. "Master," he said at last, "what was the purpose of all this? Of solitude, of silence, of struggle?" The master looked out across the flowing water. "You tell me." The disciple was quiet for a moment, then replied, "At first, I thought I was trying to escape my mind. Then, I tried to fight it. But in the end, I didn't need to do either. I just had to stop obeying it blindly." He paused, then added, "The mind will always speak. But I've learned it doesn't always need to be followed." The master nodded. "That is the beginning of true freedom." They sat by the river, the breeze cool and steady. Birds moved in and out of the trees. Time passed, but there was no hurry to fill it. "Most people," the master said gently, "live like their thoughts are truth. If their mind says, 'You are a failure,' they believe it. If it says, 'They hate you,' they react. They chase praise and run from blame, because the mind commands it. But once you see the mind for what it is, a tool, not a master, you begin to live differently." The disciple looked at the water, thinking, "So, solitude wasn't about escaping the world. It was about facing myself." "No," said the master. "It was about seeing yourself, without the noise, without the masks, without the roles. In silence, you met the only person who never leaves you, yourself." A deep breath escaped the disciple's chest, not from tiredness, but from release. A kind of relief he didn't know he had needed. They returned to the ashram, and word quickly spread. Villagers came to meet the disciple, to ask questions, to seek guidance. But he no longer responded with eagerness or pride. He listened more than he spoke. He gave space more than advice. One day, a young man asked him, "How do I find peace?" The disciple smiled softly. "Stop chasing it. Sit with yourself. Let the noise rise and let it pass. What remains after the storm, that is peace." And it has always been there. As the seasons passed, the disciple continued his practice, not just of solitude, but of attention. He swept the floor as if it mattered. He served meals as if feeding the universe. He greeted others not with words, but with presence. One evening, the master called him to the river again. "Do you remember what I said?" the master asked. "That the hardest thing in the world is solitude." "I do," said the disciple. "And the easiest thing? Also solitude." The master smiled. "Now tell me why." The disciple looked into the water. "Because solitude is not a place, but a state of being. When the mind is restless, solitude feels like prison. But when the heart is quiet, it becomes home. It's the same cave, but a different self." The master nodded, satisfied. Then he said, "Most people fear being alone because they fear meeting themselves. But what they do not realize is that until you meet yourself, you cannot truly meet anyone else." That night, the disciple sat alone beneath the stars, not to escape, but to return. The sky stretched wide above him, but he didn't feel small. He felt whole. He understood now. The mind is a restless storyteller, but silence is the page beneath it. And if one learns to rest in the stillness, the stories lose their grip. In the quiet, truth is heard. In the stillness, the self is found. And in solitude, we finally come home.